I can tell the honest truth. When the park first start, when they start like down the building and start to do the park and thing, I was real skeptical about it. That's the honest truth. I didn't know what to expect. I can tell the truth. I didn't agree with it no then, so because I didn't really know. But since the park finished and thing now, the park is so nice. The people do a very good job. Everybody coming and relaxing in the park, and it's a real nice place to be. It's some place, look at it, look. It's real nice. That's all I can say. Everybody coming and everybody enjoying it and thing, and it is something that I didn't expect. It is really beautiful. People coming and doing the schoolwork, people coming and using the laptop, people coming and relaxing. It is a it's a real nice thing. It's a real something really good that happened for Bridgetown. I give the people full marks for it.
Junior Fox Greenidge as he describes what he sees and how he feels about his Golden Square. I have visited and I think he is absolutely correct. This place is beautiful. If you have not yet seen it, I encourage all of you to come down and visit very soon. On the afternoon of Saturday, November the 27th, 2021, our Prime Minister, Mayor Amor Motley, officially opened Golden Square Freedom Park. Kevin Talma will detail the architectural designs in another program. But it is important for us to understand why this area is regarded as the seat or the birth of modern democracy in Barbados, a sanctum sanctorum. The program is led by historian Trevor Marshall, who is dressed in period costume. Attire of what period, Mr. Marshall?
From the 1930s, actually 1937. And I've heard about a man called Clement Payne. Now I am living in Nelson Street, which is a decent, respectable place for people, colored people like myself. Now, let me explain why I'm dressed like this. First of all, my hat. My hat is one worn by decent, respectable colored people of the day. We who are clerks in the commercial houses, some of us teachers, some of us got ordinary jobs. But the ordinary Nogwe people who followed Clement Payne, this is how they were dressed. Well, they wouldn't dress like me because they don't have coats, right? But they were dressed in these hats. And these are men who are longshoremen, who work on the wharves, and who work in Bridgetown, generally speaking. So I am dressed as a decent, respectable, colored man in Nelson Street. You note my jacket. It might look a bit rumpled, but in those days we did not press jackets. The shirt might look a bit rumpled, but it means that the wife did not iron it properly. She crab mashed it. But you notice how it has the cuffs down here which are turned up. And down here is exposed to show my undershirt. And you know, we don't have belts in those days. 1930s, we didn't have belts. So this is a tie. Actually, my pants is held up by a tie. And the tie is at the back. And I am wearing what in those days are good shoes. I am wearing what you would today call pension pumps or washikongs from Trinidad. So when you see me, or when you see people like me dressed like this in the 1930s, in 1937, we are not your paro type persons. We are decent, respectable colored people. And the term colored was used for black people. In fact, in the 1930s, if you called anybody black, that was a terrible insult. We were colored people. Right, the N-word was thrown in sometimes. But if you wanted to insult somebody, you called them black. Right, remember that's 80 years ago. Right, so Nelson Street, first of all. I'm living in Nelson Street. What is Nelson Street? Nelson Street is over to your left. And Nelson Street is a suburbs of Bridgetown. It is, half a mile from the city center, and it is a desirable location for us colored people, right? It was developed not because of Horatio Nelson. That is a fallacy which a lot of Barbadians share. No, it was created by John and Margaret Nelson. And as a matter of fact, we have a deed showing that the Nelsons established their land here in 1756, 2 years before Horatio Nelson was born. So please do not talk about Horatio Nelson and Nelson Street. There is absolutely no connection except the name. Nelson Street is a desirable location for us colored people who have got some money, who work. Some people work in Panama. My father worked in Panama and he came back 1914, right? And he looked around the country and he started working in the cane fields, but he didn't like it. So he moved to Bridgetown, and this place, Nelson Street, opened up for people like him. So he bought a house. And when you go down Nelson Street, you are going to see some two-story houses. The two-story houses are made of bricks, they're made of rubble, that they're beautifully plastered. We will show some of them, let you see that Nelson Street was not a red light district. It was a white light district. There are gas lamps in Nelson Street. Some people catch water at the standpipe, right? But some people have indoor plumbing, and they're living comfortably. It was a place where people like myself live. And as I was saying, some whites live there. For example, Fabriciano Alexander Hoyas, who you now know as Alexander Hoyas, he lived on Nelson Street. And he was born in Brazil, of Portuguese descent, and he was passed for white. You had Margaret Knight and her father. They lived on Nelson Street. And the story about Margaret Knight is a very interesting one because, well, as you know, she's the mother of David Thompson, who became a prime minister after Owen Arthur. And Margaret Knight has said in one of her writings that in 1937, when the black people rioted, her father came home and took out his gun and polished it and collected his wife and children and said, "The niggers are coming, the niggers are coming, we have to get out." And they skinned up the house, left it. We don't know if they went to Belleville, which was just another half-mile away and where middle-class whites lived, but they moved out of Nelson Street. Other people lived there. Other people such as the Burtons, the Harrises, the Norvilles, the Hayneses, the Medfords, the Devonish, the Fergusons, the Fields, Latouche. The Latouches came from either St. Lucia or Dominica, but there were myriad people, scores of decent, respectable people living in Nelson Street. So I'm one of them. So we have heard, March 1937, we've heard that there's a man come from Trinidad called Clement Payne.
Born in Trinidad to Barbadian parents, came here when he was 4 years old. He lived in Bank Hall, grew up in Bank Hall. He went to Wesley Hall Primary School and Bay Street Primary. He leaves Barbados at 23 years old, heads back to Trinidad. After 10 years of living in Trinidad, becoming an activist, a political activist, a member of the Marcus Garvey's UNIA, a very important working class leader, he comes back to Barbados on the 26th of March, 1937.
And now, at age 33, like Jesus, he's come back here to spread the gospel of trade unionism. So he is holding meetings down here in Golden Square.
Just to set the context, slavery had been abolished for 100 years. But in terms of social progress, there had been very little positive forward movement for the masses of the black people of Barbados. Barbados was still controlled by the sugar plantations. You had the Masters and Servants Act that still oppressed the former slave plantation laborers who were now free men, but found it difficult to escape the oppressive restrictions of the plantation. However, many of our people found a way to drift into the city, to find housing in urban communities like Golden Square, this area right here.
Now let me tell you what Golden Square is, because you may have a very fancified notion of Golden Square. I mean, after all, it's gold. What could be more precious than gold, platinum, or diamond? But it is Golden Square. Now, Golden Square came about because of fires in Bridgetown. Bridgetown was a place which had a lot of fires. In 1910, there was a big fire in this area of Fairchild Street, Nelson Street, Jordan's Lane. But people cleared out some people, but people built back. And there were good 14 by 10 houses, some with shed roofs, not a lot of them painted, but people were living comfortably next door to us in Nelson Street. And then in 1930, the 20th of July, you had a big fire. A big fire which started again Palmetto Street. You won't believe it. It swept across the bridge, the Victoria Bridge. It hit Fairchild Street. It hit Fairchild Street, as you know, runs from Independence Square all the way up to Ready Fusion, VOB. And the wind sent it. This was early March when the winds are contrary. Winds coming from the southeast, and the winds blew the fire this way. All of this area had all the ramshackle houses, a lot of pitch pine houses, dilapidated, some were eaten with wood ants, some really in need of total repair. They were burnt. 1930. And the people like us in Nelson Street, us decent, respectable people, said, those Nogwe people are gone, right? Because they were making it a slum. The area was a slum. You know what it was called? It was called raccoon quarters. A raccoon is a furry, dark animal. And the raccoon was another word we use for black people. For example, up by the promenade area, the Esplanade, there was a little village of blacks after slavery. They call it Coon Town, short for Raccoon Town. And down here was Raccoon Quarters. And they have another name for it called Rabbit Warren, because the Rabbits, John and Thomas Rabbit, had purchased land down here. This land all belonged to them, the Rabbits. So it was Rabbit's land, right? Or Rabbit Warren, and Raccoon Quarters. So you can understand, we lived in the beautiful Nelson Street, and these people lived in Rabbit's Land and Rabbit's Warren, which was a slum. It was cleared out by the fire of 1930, and we said, good, they're gone. But no, these black people in Bridgetown, they're nothing else but resilient, if not resilient. Man, and soon as the fire gone and the ashes cleared, they started to build. And build, we don't even call it building. They put up some ramshackle lean-tos. They took galvanized. They took cane trash for roofing. They got coconut fronds also for roofing. They got sticks. They used Maya-mossy. They used all kinds of building material to build back. Not build back better, but build back bolder. So this place became a slum.
This, in fact, was a very congested, urban, working class community. Many would say a slum, an urban slum. In fact, a survey was done of the Golden Square district in 1939, just 2 years after the People's Rebellion, and it was found to contain 1,386 dwellings. So we have to imagine a congested area with many small gaps and alleys, a dark area, an area of squalor. We must remember most of the houses would be very small chattel houses. Some would say shacks. Some families lived in one room, a one-room dwelling with a little shed roof. at the back for whatever cooking facilities they might have. These dwellings would not have had water toilets. So you're talking pit latrines. Some people did not even have pit latrines. Some people had to use buckets or a communal latrine. So we are talking an area of squalor, poverty. We can even say desperation, because the 1930s, the age of the Great Depression, people were unemployed, prices were rising, there was hunger in the land.
And you know, you cannot fault black people for inventiveness, for literary and verbal inventiveness. You know what they called it? You know what they called this place that had no character at all, that had the appearance of a terrible slum? They called it Golden Square. And so you say, why Golden Square? Well, it is grandiose, which means big. It is grandiloquent, meaning you use beautiful language, right? Big sounding name, Golden Square. And it is a big sounding name. And some of these people had come from Subtle Street. And Subtle Street was next door to a place called Cat's Castle. No, you don't want a more evocative name than a castle. But a Cat's Castle, that was also a slum in Bridgetown. So you have Cat's Castle about a mile from here, and Golden Square. So despite what you have thought, you hear that Clement Payne had his meetings here, and he said, meet me in Golden Square. And you think that it is like this as it is now. It was not. It was, you remember Bob Marley sang in No Woman to Cry, he said, I remember how we used to sit in the government yard in Trenchtown, observe the hypocrites. But he said, Georgie would light the fire bright, logwood burning through the night, and we would cook cornmeal porridge, of which I shared with you. But that is what Golden Square was. It was a small open area in a tenement area, a tenement yard as Bob Marley would call it. All of these houses, if you can call them houses, it was a slum. There were about 1,100 people living in the area, in the slum that was Golden Square. Right? It was really, really a crowded area. And this opening, a little opening about 10 yards square. 10 yards this way, 10 yards that way, 10 yards this way, and 10 yards that way. And houses all around. And that was what they called Golden Square. Now we've understood what Golden Square was. What use did people make of Golden Square? Well, it was, first of all, a rubbish dump for the people of Rabbit's Warren and Raccoon Quarters. And it was a dump. It was where people met to have all kinds of illicit activities. Gambling went on, throwing the dice. People met to engage in illicit activities. So Golden Square was a place where the working classes met, and you turned a blind eye to what was happening. No, so where was it? It was bounded on the north by Fairchild Street. Fairchild Street is named after John Fairchild, the Fairchild brothers, who were prominent people in this area. And that's to the north. To the south is Jordan's Lane. Henry Jordan was a man of considerable wealth, well, not so much wealth, but property and means in this society. Like us, he lived in Nelson Street, and he had a shop here, and there was a butcher shop as well on the south of this, so it was called Jordan's Lane. That's the southern boundary of it. And then to the southwest, you had the Bethel Methodist Church which was established in 1844 and was church for the Methodists. But also on that side, beyond Bethel Methodist Church, exactly south, you could see the Exchange, which was a building at the bottom of Wellington Street, owned by London Bourne. And London Bourne should be a national hero, by the way. He did so many things for black people in the 1850s, sent people back to Africa, church warden at St. Mary's, was a prominent businessman, etc. So we should look at London Bourne. But his building stood at the bottom of Wellington Street, and right up at the top of Wellington Street you had St. Ambrose Church. Now we went to church at St. Ambrose Anglican Church. We decent, respectable colored people. Now, why did we go to St. Ambrose Church? Because they created it for us. The Anglican Church created it for us. And not so much the Anglican Church as some owners of businesses like the Collymores and some other black people put up money, and the Anglican Church matched that money and put up a church for us, St. Ambrose. You know why? Because St. Cyprian's in Belleville would not allow us colored people to come there and worship. Not even the sexton at St. Cyprian was a colored man. That was, St. Cyprian's was, some people used to call it South Africa. They used to call it South Africa Church, right? And they used to call it the Dutch Reformed Church, because in South Africa, the Dutch Reformed Church said the second statement in their constitution, there shall be no equality in either church or state between black and white. So that was rigidly observed at St. Cyprian's in Belleville. So for us decent, respectable colored people, St. Ambrose was created. And here in the Southwest, as you look to your right, we had the Empire Building. The Empire Theater. It was a theater. It was a place for vaudeville production, singing and dancing, not just cinematic performances, motion picture, but it was created in 1922. So you can see the Empire in the pictures we have, and that is to the southwest. It is exactly opposite the Bethel Methodist Church. And then beyond the Empire, you cannot see it, but we had the Lock Hospital. It was for the correction of naval diseases. Barbados had a lot of sailors coming here, and sailors met the ladies of the night, and you always had a possibility of communicable diseases. As a matter of fact, the Lock Hospital was there for the treatment of gonorrhea, what we call, right? So the Lock Hospital was beyond the Empire Cinema. And when we saw people going there from this area, from Golden Square, because Golden Square was an area of prostitution. So you saw them going from Golden Square down to the Lock Hospital. We used to, right. So we knew what was happening there. Now, we must also tell you that this is an area which knew diseases. For example, Fairchild Street. Fairchild Street was a place which in 1854, a white sailor came in from Jamaica, which had cholera from 1850, and he gave a lady his trousers to wash. And the trousers, as we call it today, contain his spittle and other body fluids. And to cut a long story short, she contracted cholera, and within a month, 30,000 people in Barbados contracted cholera and 20,000 died. So this area has known its share of tragedy and infectious diseases, etc. So Golden Square, bounded by these very upstanding areas, the Bethel Methodist Church, our community, Nelson Street, the Empire Building, the Lock Hospital to the west, and to the northwest, the Careenage. The Careenage, you could see the Careenage from here over behind you to your right, and that is an area where is a swampy area. It was cleaned up in the 1960s and the area was made into a park, Independence Square, and then Dame Billy Miller cleaned it up further to make it, she beautified it. But it was a swampy area, and a lot of mosquitoes and other vermin and disease-bearing insects accumulated there. The area was not exactly a healthy one. Golden Square was not a healthy area. Golden Square has seen its fair share of as we said, environmental problems, environmental challenges, and it was a slum. We must establish that to you. It was a slum. So what attracted Clement Payne here? Well, Clement Payne, as we said, came here in March 1937 with the gospel of trade unionism, and he started his meetings in the Lower Green. Now, you know the Lower Green, you know Jubilee Gardens, created for Queen Victoria's 50th anniversary of her reign, 1887, and a little miniature of Kew Gardens in London, and it had trees and shade, and Clement Payne staying in Reed Street during the day, writing and studying and talking to people like Israel Lovell and Ulrich Grant, Darnley Alleyne, Darnley the uncle of a noted lawyer, Ezra Alleyne, Brains Alleyne he was called. So he lived in that area, and at night he would tell people, meet me the Lower Green. The Lower Green, it was called the Lower Green, distinct from the Upper Green, which was, we now know as Heroes Square, which was Trafalgar Square, where the Nelson statue came. So Clement Payne started his meetings about 3/4 of a mile from here. And then Clement Payne got problems because the authorities would gather around him in the Lower Green, and they started taking notes of what he was what he was saying, and he found himself being harassed, right? So he looked around for some place to hold his meetings, and some of his people said, you know what, Mr. Payne, you can hold them up by Church Village, which is the area where the Central Bank, where the Church Village Gardens is now, another slum area. And they examined that, but they had too much going on there, too much nighttime activity, prostitution in particular. So he said, no. That activity is not what we want to encourage or what we want to be part of, right? So they looked around, and someone said, what about the area below Nelson Street? And people came up here, he looked at it, and so it was unpromising. But Clement Payne said it is better than nothing. And he decided that wherever the people are, I will go. So he came to this area.
Golden Square. And it is here in Golden Square that most of his most important meetings are held. So you have to imagine that although it was a very congested housing area, that it had to have at least one open space that could accommodate big public meetings.
But Clement Payne said, this does not matter to me. This is like Laventille. In Trinidad, we call it Laventille. Trinidadians call it Laventille, which, as you know, is a slum community, but that's where many of the people who more or less launched the Trinidad insurrection of 1937, they started in Laventille, which was and still is a slum area. So Clement Payne was accustomed to areas which had slum conditions.
I certainly hope you now have a better understanding of why this area is referred to as the seat or the birthplace of modern democracy in Barbados. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. This has been Mind Community. The program continues next week at the same time.